to him by his religion or his philosophy or by his various teachers. The real answer to the entire problem is not to walk out on your job. It is not part of the plan of things that a person seeking holiness shall leave his own family, neglect his children, go into bankruptcy, and become dependent upon welfare. This is not the religious life. This is a symbol, a very cheap symbol of poverty, used as an example of piety. That the individual who gives up wealth, gives up all, is simply based upon the mistaken point of view that for that individual wealth is all, when it is not the case. What the Mahayana school teaches the individual to do is to stay with his job, do the things that he knows he should be doing, serve his fellow man unselfishly and thoughtfully, and at the same time keep in his heart the mystery of salvation. In other words, the heart doctrine is one of the continuous remembering of the divine plan and its purpose for us. That this remembering goes into everything we do. It goes into the arts which we create. It goes into the labors we perform for common good. The carpenter builds a house remembering the infinite love of Amida. The mother with the child cares for the child and gives her whole heart to it, really and sincerely, forgetting self, because in so doing she feels that she experiences immediately within herself the unselfish love of the Amida. So where unselfishness leads, Amida is present. Where selfishness leads, the rather unpleasant figure of the demon kings begin to arise. They are not the symbols of the pure doctrine. One of the simple symbols of Amidism is the symbol, what is called the symbol of the presence of the other. Every monk or priest or devout member of the Amidist sect believes always that he walks and lives and thinks with another. There is this other person whom he cannot see, but who never leaves him and is constantly guiding, protecting, and guarding him, and constantly helping him to sustain his faith. This other is not, however, an imaginary being, dreamed up by his own need. This other is life itself, a life which is present everywhere, always, and protects all who serve it, and punishes all who damage it. That as long as the person lives according to the laws governing life, he is under the protection of the strongest virtue and the most magnificent principle that can possibly exist. Now, according to the Buddhist doctrine, of course, the concept of gods or deities is very different from what we have. This is why, in many instances, these people have been called idolaters. They are supposed to be worshiping graven images. Actually, this is not true. The concept is, however, that instead of a mysterious, eternal principle of theocracy governing all things, that everything is in a constant process of growth. The gods are growing along with creation. They are not sitting in judgment above the divine workmanship. They are part of it, because all of these deities are actually, of any nation or of any people, are actually merely manifestations of the radiant, creative, and redemptive energy of one power. Now, the Buddhist realizes that this one power has other names. He does not attempt to insist that it has to be called anything. But it has to be recognized that all of the leading powers, all the laws, all the forces that govern existence are servants of the purpose of existence itself, which is the perfection of all that lives. Therefore, the so-called demigods or deities are agencies by means of which the purposes of infinite enlightenment are being advanced. According to this doctrine, Buddha tells his disciples the story of the Buddha Amida, that once upon a time, aeons, millions of years ago, there was a mendicant, just like himself, a wanderer upon the face of the earth, searching for truth. And this wanderer passed through many, many embodiments and found more and more of the light that he needed and desired. And at last, after hundreds of lives, he attained to the condition of an arhat, or an enlightened servant of the law. And in this condition, he gradually performed more and more saintly works until it was finally his merit over millions of years to become a bodhisattva. Bodhisattva means an enlightened self. And when he came to this degree, he became embodied in great labors of philanthropy, great labors of service. He contributed to the good of all things in a strange and wonderful way, because he was gradually diffusing himself throughout life. He was no longer working for himself. He was not even working for life. Life was working through him to the fulfillment of its own purposes. And finally, in the great day, be with us, it is said, this being attained to the right of Buddhahood. And this right was the highest good to which the being could ascend and still exist as a being in a universe of conditioned existence. And when the time came for Amida to attain to Buddhahood, he then took the great vow. The vow being that he would not accept the fullness of his own labor. He would not pass on into the infinite love of Amida. He would not go into that great glory of perfection from which there is no return. He would not leave this world until, and then he made the vow that is important to our present subject. He said, I will not attain or accept liberation from the responsibilities of existence until I can take with me into the other land the smallest of all things, the tiniest gnat floating in a sunbeam. There shall be nothing so small that I will go into perfection without taking it with me. And as a reward for this vow, he was made the Lord Buddha of the Western Paradise, the paradise of Amitabha, which is nothing but his own heart. And in this heart is the radiance of salvation, a salvation that must, however, always be earned, a salvation which is like a schooling. It is not bestowed. Salvation is not something that can be handed to someone. It is not something that can be produced by miraculous means. It is not a fulfillment based upon what we would like or what we want or what we think we deserve. Actually, enlightenment is the condition of the internal realization that we are created for one purpose alone, and that is to advance the destinies of all that lives. So with this vow, Amida became the guardian of the Western Paradise. Now, we have not noticed many times in reading religious books and so forth that nearly always paradise is located in the West. We have a slang-like term that we use here, that when someone passes on, they go west. We are not certainly involving them in Buddhism. But it seems that always, in the Greek mythology, the Blessed Isles are to the west. The New Atlantis was to the west. The Utopia was to the west. Always the blessed lands of perfection are to the west. And the ancients firmly believed that this Western Hemisphere was to be the blessed land. And certainly that was the teaching of Buddha, of Bacon, in his work, The New Atlantis. It was to the west. And it was a place where all good things would be done, and where human beings would live together in peace and happiness and wisdom. And as he puts it, that all knowledge should be for one purpose only, the accomplishment of the greatest good for the greatest number, without any implication of selfishness. So Amida, however, in the Western paradise, lives in a radiant world symbolically represented by the Taima Mandara in Japanese Buddhism. Here he is seated in paradise, and he is surrounded by the 16 intercessions, by means of which he serves those who need him. And all of these intercessions are based upon one pattern primarily, that he approaches those who have approached him. Whenever any human being, from the depths of his heart, asks for the participation in the mystery of divine love, and wishes to have the opportunity to love without self, to love without any hope of reward, without any ulterior motive, then this is the love of Amida in himself. This is the other who walks with him. This is the highest aspect of his own nature, and this highest aspect is always part of the one great love aspect of creation. So the Amidist doctrine has developed gradually, particularly through the teachings of two great monks, Honen and Shonin. These two men of entirely different temperaments made great contributions to Japanese Buddhism and became the leaders of the school of the Amidist sect. They didn't originate it. It originated in China, but they were the ones who gave it its greatest impetus in Japan. It has been called a Protestant Buddhism, and this in very large is its best definition. Honen was a very interesting man. He was a man who had to stand by while his father was brutally murdered. And as he grew older, he went to the religious life and was finally faced with probably the greatest test that a person can be faced with. He had to convert or enlighten the assassins of his father. He had to spread the love of Amida from his own heart to cover them. He had to love them in the name of truth more than he hated them in the name of the crime they had committed. And he succeeded. He succeeded in forgiving them and bringing them into a redemption. And they were definitely converted and became monks. So Shonin was a different type of man. He was a man more or less worldly in nature, impatient, dedicated, very truth-seeking, but not exactly by nature gentle or pious. He had many strange experiences and finally decided that he wasn't even worthy to be a monk because he could not even control himself properly. But gradually, through the assistance of those around him, he achieved the tranquility of spirit which made it possible for him to go on and become the founder of a great sect. There's